Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a real Azure networking lab showing how to build a secure hub-spoke architecture using Azure Firewall and Bastion, all deployed with Terraform. We'll start by examining the architecture, then go through Terraform code, and then we will actually connect to VM and show how traffic flows, including accessing a website from a private VM. Let's begin. First, let's understand the design pattern we are building. This architecture that you see on my screen, this architecture is a hub-spoke network, a recommended pattern by Microsoft for enterprise workloads. Here's the simple idea. Hub VNet, you see here, acts as a central network that provides shared services like security, connectivity, and management. We have spoke VNets, which you see here. There are four spoke VNets, two production, two non-production. For our exercise, we'll be only creating two spoke VNets. One that will be representing our workload, say we will be simulating the workload for application, and then a DB. This will be an actual real world problem where some VNets are holding your application workload and some holding your uh, DB workload. Okay. Now, if you come to Hub network, it contains critical services such as Azure Firewall. Now, Azure Firewall is a managed cloud-native networking security service that protects Azure Virtual Network resources. In this architecture, Azure Firewall is the central security and inspection point. We have Azure Bastion. Again, Azure Bastion is also a managed service which provides secure and seamless RDP or SSH access to virtual machines directly through Azure portal, eliminating the need for public IP on VM. Though we need public IP for Azure Bastion, but that public IP is not associated with the VM. The VM still have the private IP. Okay. So the traffic from all spoof in this architecture goes through the hubs where Azure Firewall inspects and controls it. This design gives us centralized control, stronger security, and better performance. Now, before I move on to my next Terraform code, as I've said earlier in my previous videos as well, it is always a good idea to plan out what infrastructure will be required. So before we move writing our actual configuration. So if you see from this architecture, right, the thing that we are going to implement is we are going to create one virtual network which will act as our hub. That virtual network will have Azure Bastion, a subnet for Azure Bastion and firewall. We'll create Azure Bastion resource and public IP for Azure Bastion and firewall. Then we'll have firewall rules. We have user defined route tables. Okay, we'll have virtual application subnet, one spoke virtual network for application, one for database, and we'll have one virtual machine in application subnet and in one in database subnet. The spokes will be connected to hub network through peering. Okay. In this, we are not going to implement VPN gateway, but for your information, VPN gateway used to connect to your on-premises network. Okay. So now let's move on to the Terraform code. I'll start with the basic. Okay. If you see my configuration that I have written, the first is always creating a resource group where all my resources will be. And one more important point I wanted to tell you is that Azure Firewall is a regional service. So if your workloads are spread across multiple regions, then each region need to have a firewall service. Okay. So I have a resource group, then I have a virtual network. This virtual network, I've named it as Hub VNet. Now, if you see the address space of this, so I have 2 octets for the host network, so this can take around 65K host it can take. This is must because it must accommodate multiple subnets. Then in the I'm creating 2 subnets. If the one is for Azure Firewall and Bastion. Now, as per the Microsoft enforced rule, the firewall subnet should have this name itself, Azure Firewall Subnet. Now the address prefix, we don't need that much of uh, I addresses for to run firewalls, so this one is fine. Similarly, for Azure Bastion, the subnet name should be this only. We cannot change. If we have the for Azure Bastion resource, if we have the subnet name as something different, that will fail. Okay, and both these resources will be part of the hub VNet. Okay, now if you see, I've created a public IP for firewall, and then we have created the firewall resource. I've associated that public IP with the firewall. Now, to give you an analogy as well, right? This firewall is like the security of your private housing society. This firewall knows like whom to allow and whom not to allow to enter the society. Okay. Similarly, this firewall knows that which traffic to allow and which to block, and we create our rules for that. But before that, we will see that I've created two more virtual networks. One for Spoke app, Spoke virtual network, which will act as which will hold my app workload, and one is for DB. Then I have a subnet for app and DB, and then I connect these Spoke VNets to my hub through peering. Okay, I connect app to hub and then DB VNet to hub. Once these are done, I need to create a route table. Okay, so all the all the outward communication to internet. This address prefix means everything to internet must be forwarded to the firewall. There, the firewall will check and accordingly allow or block that traffic. Okay. Similarly, all the communication between the two nets like should also be moved go to the firewall. Okay. So if you see, we have taken 8 because our hub VNet started with this address prefix. So this address prefix 10.0.0 will cover will cover all the traffic from within the network. Okay. So now we defined the route table. We associated them with the spoke subnets. Okay. Then we create firewall rule, and the firewall rule is to allow. Okay, we are giving a priority of 200, and the action is allow. If do these two sites, if you are accessing these two sites, it will allow. Like the source addresses, if you see with any spoke, any VM in the spoke, trying to access these two websites, it will allow. Okay, the protocol being the HTTPS protocol on this port. Otherwise, it will block any other um, traffic. Okay, then I create a bastion, a public IP for bastion. Then I create the bastion source, and I've configured the IP with bastion. Okay, IP with bastion. Here I create the network interface card for my app VM. After then I've created a VM in my spoke uh, uh, virtual network where my application workload will be present. Okay. Similarly, I create a NIC for my a VM in DB network and create a VM. Okay. And then I have also allowed the communication between the spokes using SSH on port 22. Later on, it can be changed for let's say if Microsoft SQL is there, that will have a different port. Postgres is there, that will have a different port, right? So I hope this configuration is clear to you what we have done. This we have already discussed in the architecture diagram. Now this configuration I had already completed. I have run the basic Terraform commands like Terraform init, plan and apply, and my resources are created. Okay, that we can go and check in our Terraform state as well. Okay. So So if you see, these are the all the resources that are already created. Firewall, which is managed, the address. Okay. So and we can also check this in the portal. So if you see the in the variable name, I had given RG spoke as my resource group name for this exercise, and I can see it in the resource group. Okay, I have the app VM, I have Bastion, I have firewall. Okay, then this is the Bastion public IP. Then I have Hub Firewall. This is the firewall public IP. Okay, then I have DBVM and app VM. Now let's open the app VM. I'll connect to this app VM through Bastion. So as I said, discussed earlier, Bastion eliminates the need for uh, public IP on the VM. Okay, and we can access the VM through the browser. It's asking for the username and password. So you can go here, the password that I had given in my configuration while creating the VM. And this is my app VM. This is the password. I just copy and connect. Give it here. It will open in the new terminal. So as you see, now I'm able to connect to the VM, the app VM. And now I'll try to access Microsoft.com, right? So So if you see, Microsoft.com was allowed. So if I give this, I'll be able to see the response. Okay. And I'm able to connect to Microsoft.com. But if I try to connect to say Google.com, okay, it will not allow me. Okay. So this is how Azure Firewall and this hub and spoke architecture will implement security and and centralize the resources in Spark which are used by different spokes. So I hope this video was helpful to you, and especially if you're preparing for Easy 700 or Easy 104, this will be really helpful. And let me know if this video helped you in any way, and if you want and any areas of improvement for me. So thank you for joining me in this video.